Evening and welcome to the Higher
Recording
Heights
in progress.
for America virtual political leadership training series. Thank you for joining us for the last session in the summer series. Throughout the course of the summer, you have joined Black women from across the country for our Power Pack sessions with leading experts that will provide tools and information from fundraising and communications to developing an action plan and sharpening your leadership skills. With so many other things competing for your attention, we don't take it for granted that you have showed up for each of our events this summer. Thank you so much for committing to reach higher with us. Be sure to let us know where you are joining us from tonight in the chat. And be sure to drop any questions that you have as well. Also, don't forget to get the latest Black Women Lead merch. We have a couple of new items that I think will be really excited. Well, with no further ado, we are excited for the conversation this evening. So I am kicking it over to our fearless leader, Glynda Carr, to get the conversation started. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you for joining the hashtag Black Women Lead Political Webinar series. I am so excited about this conversation called Beyond 2020. A strategy with some of the leading experts and thought leaders in our community as we deep dive into what's next for Black women running for office, around Black women's political power, as we fight on multiple fronts to protect the very rights that we've been fighting for 50 years. And so what we need to know is what's the strategy we need to support Black women's representation from the voting booth to elected office. As we always say, at the end of the day, Black women want what our neighbors want. We want economically thriving, educated, healthy, and safe communities. And that's the work that we collectively need to do, not only leading into the midterm elections, but frankly, the work of every day to ensure that we are holding our elected officials accountable and frankly, creating the environment for our champions who are fighting the good fight on the at city halls, state legislatures, on Capitol Hill, and in the White House. So joining us tonight is the first African-American to head the South Carolina Democratic Party, and is currently the DNC chair, Jaime Hairston. In 2020, you may recall, Jaime ran for U.S. Senate from the great state of South Carolina, building this national grassroots movement to support his campaign and setting like amazing fundraising records, raising some of the most money from the grass tops to the grassroots to support his candidacy. And he, I believe, is in the right place at the right time, leading the Democratic National Committee. Also joining us is Congressional woman Lisa Blount Rochester from Delaware, y'all. She is currently serves as the Assistant Whip for the House Leadership and sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Next is a good friend, Wendi Wallace. We've been colleagues for years and so excited about her role as the Deputy Executive Director of the Democratic Governors Association, an important association as relates to electing governors across the country. But for Higher Heights, we're excited because we are on a strategy to elect Black women governors across this country. And so in this role, she serves as a liaison to sitting governors for the committee, as well as the point of contact for partnering organizations like Higher Heights. And finally, definitely not a stranger to Higher Heights, one of our early founding supporters, research partners, thought leaders, and communication expert extraordinaire, none other than CNN political commentator and political strategist, Finney. Finney served as the senior advisor to Stacey Abrams' 2018 gubernatorial campaign and has served on a variety of other campaigns, including being the senior spokesperson for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. So thank you, y'all, for joining us for this conversation. Just some housekeeping rules. If you are watching, drop your commentary in the feed. hit social media, use hashtag Black Women Lead. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. Follow Higher Heights on Twitter at Higher Heights, on Facebook and Instagram at Higher Heights and the number 4. And more importantly, if you have any questions, particularly to our, we call our in-Zoom audience of Higher Heights members, please drop your questions in the chat and we will integrate those comments and those questions in our conversation tonight. So I'll kick it over to Karen to get us started.
All right, Glynda, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And you forgot the one race that I worked on that's the most important for the purpose of tonight, Jaime Harrison's race for Senate. It was a great race. And wow, he really did some incredible things in South Carolina. We're so proud to have him as our party chair. So I'm going to kick things off with a conversation that we actually started having earlier this year when we got our MVP, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden were elected, but it left us, with the reality that we have no Black women in the U.S. Senate. We have 23 Black women in the U.S. Congress, and we have one of them with us here tonight, thankfully. So I'm going to kick it to the group, and maybe Congresswoman, I'll start with you, and then I'll just ask everybody to respond. What is it going to take to get a Black woman in the Senate, to get folks to get the right candidates to run, and to get a Black woman elected to the Senate?
Well, first of all, Karen, it is incredible to be with you. I always love being in your company and all of the wisdom that you share from a comms perspective and just from a political wisdom perspective. I'm also really happy to be here with Jaime Harrison, somebody who can actually not just talk about running from the perspective of the politics, but who has actually experienced it himself and knows what it really will take. And so I think he's a perfect person to also have on this panel. And then Glynda, my good friend, I always think of the Wizard of Oz when I think of Glynda and just how fabulous she is, because as a person who never ran for anything in life before until I ran for Congress, I know that it was organizations like Higher Heights that actually gave me the confidence even to run. And I think there are a couple of different lanes when you think of how are we going to achieve this. The good news is we elected the first Black woman vice president. The bad news is there are no longer any Black women in the Senate. But the reality is we've got some folks that are running now, like a Val Demings. We got women who are ready and poised to do it. They're competent, they have confidence, and they're qualified. And I think, the other big thing that we all know, and I just put it out here from the top of the call, it's also about money.
Yes.
I would just keep it. And my middle name is Blunt. So I'm going to just be blunt about this. To run for Senate, even to run for the House took over $1 million in a small state like Delaware. And so, and as Black women, one of the hardest challenges we have sometimes is asking for money about ourselves. And so there's those internal struggles of, am I competent? Am I confident? Do I have the resources? Can I balance all of this? And then there's the external pressures of how people perceive us and how we can actually get those resources. And so I think the point of this conversation is that we need to be strategic. Let's be intentional about this. Who are they? Identify them, get them the resources. And that's how we were able, I believe, to have the success of having a Kamala Harris as the vice president of this country. We were intentional.
I just want to pick up on that for a moment. And Wendi, I'm going to come to you because one of the things that the Congresswoman just talked about so bluntly, as we love, that she can do, is to make this point, and Glynda and I have talked about this many times, resources. And sometimes, Jaime knows this, candidates of color, particularly Black women, women of color, when we're running, it is harder for us to raise money. We have got to really make the case. I remember this when I was working with Stacey, folks are like, can she really win? So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure you're seeing that right now with some of the women looking to run for governor. How do we help Black women make their case about why they are the right investment for donors.
Absolutely. I thank you so much, everyone. I'm so glad to be here tonight. This feels like coming home for me. But I think, Karen, you're absolutely right. I mean, I have conversations with people all the time who are very interested in funding the next Stacey Abrams. And I have to, fix my face and be professional and not remind those same people that they didn't fund the original Stacey Abrams. Before she was, Stacey Abrams has been in the trenches a long time. She didn't just show up in 2018 the same way Jaime didn't just show up in 2020 and want to run for Senate. Like, these are people who have been around. And I think to the Congresswoman's point, we need a network that can support these women. Everyone wants to put on their Kamala t-shirt and be very excited that we now have a Madam Vice President. But again, these are not people who thought that she could be president. These are not people who were even 100% sold on her being the AG. And I think part of it has to come from within, having a network that says, of course she's qualified. Of course she can do the job. Of course. And yes, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I think we have seen all kinds of races and women who are really coming to the forefront. We have Deirdre DeJere in Iowa, who's running for governor this year. We have Mia McLeod, who's running for governor in South Carolina. And running statewide is tough. And it doesn't matter how big or how small the state is. We need Black women to be supported and to have the network to really get the job done. And I think Val Demings is another great example when we talk about the Senate of a woman who has an incredible career, a Black woman who has really gotten it done, who has a lot to show, and should have no problem getting the resources she needs and the support that she needs. But we also know it's going to be tough. And so I was incredibly disappointed that she didn't want to run for governor, but I would love nothing more than to see her succeed and be our Black woman, our first kind of step into getting Black women back into the U.S. Senate.
Well, and remember, we've got a Black woman running for Senate. I would be remiss since I'm helping her out, I have to be honest there. We've got Sherry Beasley in North Carolina, and hopefully we'll have more Black women who want to get in.
Glynda, Harper too, right?
Yes. And Glynda, before I turn over to you for the second question, I just want to get Jaime in on this one real quick, which is, as our party chair, tell us that our donors and our voters and our people, our party is ready to elect a Black woman to the Senate.
Well, I can tell you, Karen, I'm ready to elect a Black woman to the Senate, and I'm going to pull the party, regardless of whether it wants to or not, kicking and screaming to make sure that we do. I've spoken with a lot of the Black women who thought about running statewide, even before I became chair, just so that they could get a sense of what it means to run statewide. What does it mean to raise the money that is so necessary in order to get your name out there, to build the operation that is necessary? I've had many conversations. I've talked to Sherry, Erica in North Carolina. I've talked to Val on a number of occasions. My former campaign manager is now Val's campaign manager. And y'all, she's doing pretty well in fundraising, but she can use more help. So make a contribution if you haven't done so. Sherry as well, and Erica and all of them. And I'm very, very proud of the operations that they're building already. And I really think Stacey helped to break the ceiling here to show folks that African Americans, candidates, and specifically Black women, can run credible races. I still believe in my heart that Stacey won, had not for the voter suppression. And so, she was an inspiration for me to think about running in South Carolina. And I hope that my campaign was an inspiration for other folks. We're standing on her shoulders and the shoulders of others. And so we got to do all that we can to support Black women as they toss their hats in the ring. One of the things that I hope to do as DNC chair is, particularly as, I'm sort of constricted when we have primaries and all, but I do want to introduce those candidates to some of the largest donors in the Democratic Party so that they can establish their own relationships, so that people can see the special type of energy that they bring as candidates. I often say Val Demings has soulful charisma. There is something special about her that she brings, and that's why I think she is going to give Marco Rubio the race of his life, and she's going to win that race. I believe that to the core of who I am. But we got to make sure that she has all of the resources that are necessary for her to do that. And that's for all of our Black women that are running. And so for any of them who called me up, who want advice about how you build a grassroots fundraising network and how you do all those things, I'm always open to those candidates. And I hope that one of the things that we're building with our outreach efforts is to do some of that teaching for Black women candidates, Black candidates in general, about all of the things that are so necessary to build that type of network and fundraising apparatus so that people take you seriously, so that people will invest in your campaigns, because that's a big component of it.
Yeah. And so I first have to comment on Wendi Wallace talking about revisionist history, because people assume that we're living in an era of thank Black women. And I think we often have to remind people that we need sustainable support and investment, and that the very women that folk are saying were with day one, actually we're not even day twos, but Stacey Abrams calls me her petty friend, like I don't forget. But that being said, that Black women's growing political power has been more than a decade in the making, right? Black women have been the backbone to not only the Democratic Party, but more importantly, we are the architects of this democracy, from the Black suffragists to the modern day Sojourner Truths, activists to advocates to policymakers and staffers and elected officials. We put more into this democracy than we get back. And we certainly are living in a moment that Black women are demanding our return on our voting investment. So if y'all recall, back in 2017, Black women leaders across the country came together and penned a open letter to then DNC chair Tom Perez. It was at a time where there was research pointing to particularly Black women. It was Cornell Boucher talking about Black women feeling that their vote was being taken for granted, not only by elected officials, but our party infrastructure. And that's not just the DNC, but our other committees. And frankly, I know we're talking about the pathway forward with Democrats tonight, but frankly, the Republicans certainly are discounting the Republican Black women across this country. And so we penned this letter, had a series of conversations, and work has been done over the last 10 years, 5 years, around how do we truly invest in Black women's political leadership early. As you're aware, if you point to our research with the Center for American Women in Politics, we see a growing number of Black women running and winning. We are setting a pace to have a record number of Black women run for Congress next year. And the hope is we will increase the number of Black women nominees, and more importantly, Black women who will be winning in next November. And so, Jaime, this question to you is, you've seen kind of the work in the step forward, but what is the work that we truly need to do for Black women to see themselves in this democracy as active participants beyond the voting booth? And more importantly, what is your thoughts, not only as you sit in your leadership post, but your colleagues across the party, of how we ought to be building a strategy to harness Black women's political power 365 days a year, from the woman who, continues to want to be a voter, to the woman who wants to advocate on the issues they care about, to the woman who's thinking about running for office, and more importantly, for us to really support our elected women like Elisa Blount Rochester and the Black women that are serving across this country on the local, state, and national level.
Well, thank you for that, Glynda. And you're right. And listen, I think that there was some progress made at the DNC based off of your conversations with Tom. There's still a lot of work to a lot of room to grow and to go. One of the programs that came out of those conversations was a seat at the table program, which was, there were a series of listening sessions around the country, toolkit distributions, a lot of relevant trainings, and even a micro grant program to assist Black women in key states with turnout efforts. One of the things that we are working right now, the head of our coalitions department, the two people who head our coalitions department are two African-American women. Brincia Berry and also Ebony. And one of the things that we are working on right now is the expansion of the seat at the table, the expansion of those micro grant programs, because one of the things that we want to do is empower people empower Black women on a local level. I mean, when you think about Ossoff and Warnock and how they came to victory, there's a lot of the work because of what Stacey did and LaTosha Brown and Nakima Williams. But there was also a lot of work of those moms and the grandmas in those little rural counties who always, people went to in order to get guidance about who you vote for, whether or not where you get your signs and all that. Those people need to be empowered as well. They need to have resources as well. And so what we're looking at DNC is how can we increase the amount of funds that we send on a micro level to some of those pioneers in those very rural communities, not just the people at the top, but those on the bottom that are all doing the work each and every day. So we are looking at an expansion of that. We're looking at supporting our state parties and creating more fellowship programs. When I was state party chair, I created James E. Clyburn Political Fellowship. That fellowship's been going for about 4 or 5 years now. 60% of the graduates of the fellowship are Black women. And when you take a look at, and I give you a perfect example of how the growth in Black women leadership in South Carolina. One, we got 2 Black women who are running for United States Senate against Tim Scott. We got a Black woman who's running for governor against Henry McMaster. But in 2008, when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton ran for president, amongst others, for the first time, we had 2 Black women to become state directors for presidential campaigns. In 2020, when we had these candidates going, we had at least 7 Black women running statewide presidential campaigns in South Carolina. Folks, there's tremendous amount of growth. And now that is the standard. Like the next presidential campaign that we have that's competitive, I am sure almost 100% will probably be Black women running those campaigns. And that is the standard that has been made. We're making tremendous progress, but we got so much more to do. So just know on my part, there is not only a seat at the table, but you got to be able to actually help craft the menu at the table as well. And it's that empowerment of the leaders that we have in office now, but also making sure that we are training the next generation. And so I am totally committed to that. Again, Black women who run coalitions, the people who run coalitions are Black women at the DNC. The woman who runs our voter protection efforts and our all of our registration efforts, Raina Walters Morgan, Black woman from North Carolina as well. So we are making sure that there are folks at the table who are guiding the work that we're doing and building out to make sure that we can bring more sisters on board.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Because, when Black women are running things, it's going to get done. Not saying we're going there too. I just am saying. So I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because I know we want to have time for audience questions. I want to ask our panel, and Wendi, I'll start with you, lesson learned from 2021, and maybe let's think about how can we apply those for 2022. And I think one of the biggest ones that Jaime just talked about, which is the pipeline, building that pipeline of talent to be campaign managers, to be finance directors, to be, let's be honest, we tend to be, the field directors. but like, how do we get the political directors, the people traveling with the candidate right at the side of the candidate? How do we build that pipeline? And what other lessons learned from 2020 would you apply for us as we look ahead to 2022?
Yeah, I think this is the most important part, the pipeline piece for me anyway. I think of how there were so many people brought into the pipeline in 2020 just by the breadth of presidential candidates that we had. And I think, Republicans tend to do a really good job retaining talent. And it is something that I have pushed our committee and some of our counterparts on, and really trying to figure out how do we, have a better resume bank? How do we do a better job of kind of bringing people in, giving people a landing place in between campaigns? What can we really do to help diversify campaigns? We're starting to have 2022 races reach out to us. They've got like their campaign managers in place. And one of our comms people yesterday said to me, we brought on somebody really great and we got their resume from you. I think you got it from an organization I can't remember the name of, but the Michigan team is looking to staff up. How can we get this job description in front of networks that can give them good talent? And I think part of it is really working with our counterparts at the DNC and other committees to make sure that we're not missing anybody. We're not losing people in what can be considered downtime from campaigns, and really being able to spend time with people. I think the pandemic has made it really hard, but one of the things that I was sort of brought up in politics believing is you take every meeting. So when someone says to me, hey, Wendi, can you have coffee with my intern? Yes, I can. Let's figure out the day. Let's figure out the time. I do it because I need to be in touch with people so that when someone says to me, oh, I need a finance assistant, or, oh, I need someone who can be like a scheduler, someone who can do this, I can say like, oh, I do know somebody. Let me see if they're still available. And we can have a network that is broad and can really bring people in and keep them in. And so I think there's nothing more important than making sure that the staffing network, and some of those people go on to run for office, but we need Black women in all these positions, and we need to make sure that the network is strong.
Congresswoman Blunt Rochester, any lessons learned from 2020 or just from your career as having run for office that you would share with folks about 2022 as we think about electing Black women?
This has been an incredible conversation, because even as I'm listening, I'm taking it all in, and I think about the entire ecosystem. Like when Jaime was talking about the DNC, in addition to those individuals that are on the ground that need resources, you also think about who are the contractors, who are the consultants, who are the people that are being hired? Because I know as a candidate, it's hard to try to educate people on my experience, and I don't have the time. So the machine, who's running the machine is really important. The messaging, one of the things that I think was so powerful during this past election, many of you know I was on the VP selection committee. And so, it was really, even once, one of the trainings that we got was about how challenging it is for women candidates and how we're judged so differently in so many ways. And even currently, with this current situation for our vice president. But what we were able to do, particularly as Black women, was say, we're going to cut that rumor off. We're going to stop that at the pass. We controlled a lot of the narrative by using social media, by using great, people like you and Wendi that could really tell the full stories. So messaging is very important, I learned, and that we also have power even in a pandemic, that we just got creative. And that's what we do. as Black women. It's like we get creative. And then the other thing, I got to mention money over and over again, because one of the hardest parts, we can recruit as many candidates as we want, but one of the hardest parts is that people will look at you and say, are they viable? That's the word they use. Is that person viable? And what they're really saying is, can you raise money? Can you get out there and campaign like that? And, I had years as the Secretary of Labor, Urban League CEO, but I never did anything like this. And I ran statewide, and I had to I had to actually use money that was from my husband's passing, to just say, you might not believe in me, but I got to believe in me, and I believe in what I'm fighting for. We got to make sure that we support organizations like Higher Heights.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, you don't know. That's why I don't even know. I think I do direct deposit out of my checkbook or something, because I feel like we got to support these candidates and all of these folks that are on here running for council, running for school boards. All of those positions matter, especially right now, because the local is where the rubber's meeting the road. So I just think this is an incredible conversation, and it's important. It's about the message. It's about the money. It's about mentors. It's the M&Ms. It's the M&Ms.
I love it.
Yeah.
Karen, do you mind if there's something the Congresswoman said that I want to highlight? We also have a Black woman who is our DEI, the director of DEI, and she's counsel for the DNC. So she's heading our efforts to reach out to minority vendors and get them involved in making sure that the DNC is spending its money in the communities that are supporting it. We are having a minority vendor symposium on the end of this month, September 29th and 30th. Folks, go to DNC's website. There will be information posted on that. We want to make sure if you're a Black woman who has a supplier, you're a vendor, and you want to get involved and you want the Democratic Party to support you, and all of the committees are partnering on this. So the DGA, the D-TRIP, the DS as well. But it's something that it's very important to me that our community supports Democratic politics and Democratic Party. Our party needs to support our community, and that is in all ways. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And the Congresswoman is spot on. We need to make sure that we're spending money in the communities that are supporting us.
So, Jaime, I saw someone drop into the chat to give a little more direction on if somebody's interested, because I know there's a process, right? So you've got a vendor fair coming up.
So Tamara Chrysler is over the DEI. I will make sure to put her email address in the chat box for everybody. You can send Tamara, or you can go to DNC's website.
You better tell her you put her name.
I
Yeah,
know she's gonna be mad. She's like, oh,
she ain't gonna be mad. She's not going to be mad. She actually loves hearing from so many people who are interested in what's going on. So, but she's absolutely fantastic and is building a great program again, so that we are living our values, not just talking about them, but living them.
Yeah. And then I'll answer a question. I'm going to kick it to Karen. We're going to talk a little bit about research. So Higher Heights does two things. We're your political home, right? Your resource, your go-to place to be informed and engage and to take action. And so we do host trainings. This is more of a conversation tonight, but this is part of our end of summer training series. Aisha is going to make an announcement at the end of this that we're hosting our fall boot camp. Very excited about that. And our sister organization, Higher Heights Leadership Fund, hosts a fellowship. Our first cohort just went through a COVID cohort. We're revamping based on COVID protocols, and that will come back in 2022. But that's a 7 to 9 month investment in senior civic leaders like Black women who are on this conversation tonight, founders of organizations, staffers, elected women thinking about running for office, for us to invest in our leadership and our ability to create a space for us to imagine the world that we want to lead in. But being able to create an environment for Black women to vote, run, win, and lead, it needs to be research-based.
Yes. Yes, it does. And so some of the research that I've been fortunate enough to work with Glynda on is really looking at support for Black women's leadership. Because as the Congresswoman noted, and as Jaime knows, when you're a person of color running for office, you are dealing with a whole different set of challenges in terms of how people see you, how they perceive you as a credible messenger. Can they see you as a leader? We dealt with this a lot in Stacey's race, because obviously when you're running to be a chief executive, how do people view that role? Can they see you? I always say in races, it's so important to get people to see the candidate in the role that you're running for. It's true for anyone, but particularly for women of color. And so we've done some research, as Glynda knows, really showing that there really is an audience for Black women's political leadership, in part because one of the things that's so interesting, women, we know from our research, and particularly Black women, Black folks, we are not seen as being creatures of Washington. Folks know that we are not the establishment. We are not on the inside. We're always fighting to get our seat at the table. And so using that to our advantage. And people also know that a lot of, when Black women are talking, we are talking about the experiences of a lot of folk in our community, right? Because a lot of the challenges that we are talking about, that we are dealing with and seeing in our daily lives, really relate. It's very relatable for folks. And also just mention the idea that we bring a unique lived experience. And again, when people think about what that lived experience is, the ability to bring people together, especially when they think about Washington, bring people together to solve problems, because folks know that we really got to have less rancor and more collaboration, Glynda.
Yeah, research definitely points to that Black women's leadership actually transcends race, social economic background, and geographical location. We are now seeing, women represent, diverse districts, or frankly, a Lauren Underwood who represents a district that is 3% Black. And so, as Karen mentioned, our leadership resonates with general voters, and frankly, general what's called split voters. Right? Our research that we just did coming out of the Virginia primary showed that voters who may split their ticket and vote Democrat and Republican, that they actually see traits in Black women elected leaders that is desirable. That I think they also have seen, I would call it, they've seen times 100 over the last 500 days during COVID-19, how Black women are boldly leading in elected office, from the mayors of top 100 cities to the 25 Black women that are serving in Congress right now to, the vice president. But we need to create the environment for Black women to run, win, and lead. And there's certainly a lot of cultural work that needs to be done. Historic barriers for Black women running for office have been access to early support and early money, as well as navigating the political infrastructure. One of the things that we've seen coming out of the 2020 presidential, because we had a record number of women running for president, on the Democratic side, is that there's this now new coded word around electability that Karen talked about, right? Electability actually doesn't have a political definition other than electability means a woman, right? You oftentimes don't broadly see, and particularly in media or in chattering classes, someone saying that a man is not electable.
Right.
Dan, have you heard it?
Nope.
And most likely said man may not be electable, but it has now become some coded messaging. And so certainly as Black women, that we need to continue to call each other, because oftentimes I'm in private conversations where we talk about electability. I'm in work conversations around electability, and I certainly know in the media. And so we need to hold people to the fire to say, we can certainly talk about, political science is a science for a reason around, what can we do to strengthen somebody's electability, but we certainly should be calling out those who will deem someone not electable or isn't ready to run for a higher office. And so that is the work of Higher Heights over the next year and a half. Is we'll be partnering with researchers and partners like a Karen Finney to do that additional research around how do we talk about Black women candidates. We are developing a 10-year strategic plan for Black women's political leadership. So we want to imagine 2030 and imagine back, what does 2030 look like for Black women? And it's not just about a representative democracy. It is that our very circumstances that are tied to public policies have significantly changed in 10 years. And we certainly believe the foundation of that is strengthening our political leadership. And we certainly are broadening the definition of political leadership, because Jaime mentioned this. Political leadership is that micro influencer, right? Which is your neighbor Jane, who literally influences the entire block about who they ought to be voting for, and giving them all the tools to vote, to ensuring that we have Black women vendors and campaign staff members, and frankly, I came as a government staffers, right, to ensure that we have Black women in every leadership role across this country to influence the policies that impact us on a day-to-day basis. Karen, anything else on any upcoming research that you want to just touch upon before we move forward?
No, I'm good. We don't give away all our good secrets.
We're all like, we up here giving all, we're all policy wonks here. And so I think I would leave, I saw a couple of questions in the chat, so we're going to integrate that into our last couple of minutes. One of the questions, and I'm going to have Representative Blunt Rochester and then Jaime answer this question. And Wendi, if you want to jump in, I have another question for you, Jaime, is literally we are fighting to hold the line on the progress that we've made, in that not only our four mothers and fathers fought for, but as Black women who have sowed so much into this democracy, we can't end the evening with not talking about some of the policy battles. And so certainly to elect Black women, to elect the leaders that will hold the values, Black women are issue and value voters, that we have to fight these voter suppression attempts state by state, with Texas leading part of the way. What do we need to do as Black women to arm ourselves from a policy perspective, but also an advocacy perspective over the next 16 months to fight these voter suppression? And I'll throw it to the representative first, and then Jaime.
Well, I'll just start off by saying, I concur. Everything is tied to the vote. I mean, everything that we talk about, whether it's COVID, whether it's jobs, childcare, it is tied. The climate is tied to the vote. And so to me, that is a number one priority. And I'm not even looking 16 months out. I'm looking like the next 60 days. Mm-hmm. How do we get HR 1 and HR 4 done? Because it's just imperative. And so the positive thing about it is, at least in the House, we've passed HR 1. We just passed HR 4. I was blessed to actually be the Speaker pro tem and gavel it down that day. Like that, I could feel John Lewis's spirit in the room. But we also know that we've got procedural things like the filibuster that are out there. And so, my mantra has been, don't let process stop progress. And so over the next 60 days, all of those Black women who, like Joyce Beatty, who's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who was out there with all those incredible Black women standing up and saying, we're not going to let this slide. We got to keep that pressure on. We can't, even though there's so many competing things out there, we have to keep the pressure on that these are priorities, because everything is tied to the vote. And so people speaking out, people doing their op-eds, people going on television, people talking to the members across the country, especially in the Senate, because the Senate is where our challenge is right now. We got to push forward there. I'm hopeful. I'm more hopeful now than I was if you had asked me 6 weeks ago where we are on getting this done. Part of that is because of the writing and the changes that are happening on the Senate side, and reaching out to people like Stacey and others to say, what has to happen right now? I'm a lot more hopeful than I was before, but we're not there yet. And so to me, that's job one, is getting that passed. And then I have to add in the piece about the Build Back Better plan, because everything, again, we care about childcare. We care about jobs. And when Karen was talking earlier about, how we are, we get people to work together, I only ran on two things my first time: jobs and bringing people together. That was it. That was it. I didn't make it complicated. It was like, and so the next couple of 60 and actually 30 days for that, I don't even know if it's 30 days now, because we're starting to mark up those bills for jobs, childcare, climate, all of those things. So just keep the pressure on. Just keep the pressure on.
And I would add to what the Congresswoman said about the keeping the pressure on and making sure that you pressure our allies. On the battle for voting rights, that should not just be a battle of Black folks.
That's right.
It should not be. So if you got, you work with corporations or you work with folks who are like, yeah, I agree with you about voting rights and this and that, well, then you need to get arrested too. It should not just be Joyce Beatty and the Black women or Hank Johnson and the Black men who are getting arrested for voting rights, because we just celebrated the anniversary of the 19th Amendment, because women in this country, all women in this country, didn't always have the right to vote. And so it's important that people who have benefited from the struggles, from the blood, sweat, and tears that Black folks have spilt and cried and everything else, that they should also have skin in the game in terms of making sure that we fight for these rights. Because carrying the weight of this alone is too much. It is too much to bear, and it's constant and it's unwavering. And so, folks, it is very, very important that we push on that. Another battle that we have going on is women's right to control their own bodies. Yes. With the Supreme Court. Again, folks, and this is what we see when we say elections have consequences. Now, we think about Hillary's race, right? We think about what would have happened had that happened, or the pressure. What would have happened had Barack Obama nominated a Black woman for the Supreme Court instead of Justice Garland? Maybe that's taboo, but I'm going to put it out there and say it, right? The dynamics of politics change. And we got to think about these things and think about the long-term ramifications and decisions of the actions we make, and why it's so important that we go and exercise our right to vote and get our family members and everybody else. Because when we don't, the brunt of what happens falls on our communities. And it always does. And so the pressure has to stay on. I can tell y'all I'm putting pressure on as much as I can in terms of I can control. But at the same time, I'm also preparing for if things don't go the way that we need it to, that we still can fight and win in the end, because things can only get worse from here. So don't think this is the bottom. We know what the bottom is. Our forefathers and foremothers have been to the bottom. We've seen that. But we got to make sure we have a fail-safe to make sure that we don't hit that rock bottom. And I know that we won't, and we'll push hard to do that. But again, put the pressure on folks.
Yeah. And I would just say oftentimes, national elections and the federal elections are, the sexy Black dress, right? Right. It's like everybody converges, and it is an important fight. But Wendi, I'll just give you kind of the last word of talking about, the importance of looking at the states, both from the governors, but also our state legislatures across the country, and how, as Black women, we need to be laser focused, not only of what's happening in Washington, but what is also happening in the states.
Thank you so much. My favorite topic. I would just say, Texas is a great example. What happened in Georgia is a great example. And those are the big sort of flashes in the pan of how elections have consequences, like the chairman said. But at the state and local level, that is also where we can put pressure and deal with some of the issues that are the most important to us, whether it's voting rights or reproductive rights. I think a lot of times they do get overshadowed by what's happening at the federal level. And trust me, I want HR 1 and HR 4 moving forward. I want all of the big sweeping legislation coming out of the Senate. But in the meantime, the people who are holding the line are state legislators in Texas. They are governors who are vetoing bad bills. all of those things are happening. And I would be remiss if I didn't also say, especially with Sherry Beasley on the ballot in North Carolina, just to bring it all the way back, we lost a really important race in 2020 by not having her on the North Carolina State Supreme Court anymore. And these courts matter. We never would be in the position that we're in Texas if the courts were more favorable. So as we are thinking about where voters need to put their focus, where we can make contributions, we should be thinking about, is there a state Supreme Court race? Is there a judicial race? Is there a state legislative race? You know, mayorals, gubernatorials, like all of these things impact the day-to-day lives of not only our community, but the country as a whole. And you have a lot of different opportunities in which to intersect and make your voice heard. And so I think, you know, it's really important that we look at the picture as a whole. And I agree, like the sexy black dress doesn't work as well if you don't have the shoe to go with it and the accessories to go with it. If you don't have the earrings and the lipstick and the bracelet, like we need them all. So we have to put the big picture together.
Thanks for leaning in and adding to the analogy. Love that. So our time is closing. We debated, you know, the team was initially, oh, this needs to be 90 minutes. No, we good. We can do this in 60. Well, we probably did need 90. But thank you so much for taking the time for this conversation. It's just one in a series. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for engaging with Higher Heights. I have one question that I just came up with that wasn't in none of your briefing pieces, but I know y'all can hit this, which is, there was a lot of questions about, I want to get started. I want to be more engaged. I want to run for office. I want to be an operative. I want to be a vendor. And we all, you know, everybody, you know, Jamie didn't wake up being Jamie. Representative Blount Rochester didn't wake up being a congressional member. We all started somewhere. You know, I started because I folded envelopes with my parents because they were activists. And so it's just about that next level. So I would say, what is your advice? I was going to give y'all one word, but give you one ability to do one word. What is your advice to the Black women that are listening now of how we are actually going to continue in the legacy of Shirley Chisholm stepping into and leading in our unbossed power? And I'll start with Wendi, Jaime, Karen, and then Representative Blount Rochester to round us out.
Ooh, okay. Let's see where to start. I mean, I would say as a person who never really wanted to be in politics, because that was like kind of taboo when I was growing up, I would say start with a person or a cause that you really believe in. I think the important thing is to have it come from a real place that is authentic to you. And to know what you're fighting for, because it's going to be a fight. So get in, be there, show up early, but make sure it is someone or something that you believe in.
I would add on to what Wendi said is you follow your passions and then you find some place in order to test that passion out to see whether or not it's really what you're interested in doing. You know, one of the things that I did, the Congressional Black Caucus internship program. I started as an intern in Clyburn's office. Then they invited me back as a staffer. I did the CVCI boot camp. There's so many opportunities out there now, and the internships on the Hill are paid, y'all. That's a big difference from the time when I went through. They were not paid. You had to find that nickel and dime in order to go up to DC. So, you know, find those type of internships. I actually wrote a book a few years ago called Climbing the Hill, How to Build a Career in Politics and Make a Difference. And it's a guidebook. Everything that I wish somebody would have told me as I was trying to explore how to work on the Hill and get these positions and understand how the committees are different from leadership, I put all of that into that book. You don't have to pay for it. Don't tell my publisher that. Go to the library. You can get it for free. But it is a heartfelt guide for young people who are really and people who are thinking about changing their careers, but are interested in getting in politics and going to the Hill or going to state houses and making a difference. And we need more of you to do just that. So find that opportunity.
So I'll say, in addition to volunteering or reading Jamie's book for sure, run for office, run for something. You don't have to run for Congress or the Senate. You could run for your local school board, the Board of Elections. I mean, you can, look at what's going on in your state and again, follow your passion and see if there's a role where you could just run for office, dip your toe in that water and see if that's right for you.
Okay, last but not least, I gotta go back to what Wendi said, because I actually thought to myself, if I was asked this question, what would I say? And it was really, know your why. Why me? Why now? Why am I doing this? Because when it gets really, really hard, and it did, like I was balled up crying in the bathroom floor. Like, why did I, the why propels you and keeps you going. And right before this, I actually found a journal and an entry from June 17th, the year 2000, where I was writing a letter to God about my life and what was happening in it. I was destined for a divorce. I had 2 kids. It was like, and I didn't run until 2015 and won in 2016. I was over 50. I was a widow. Didn't know what I was going to do next with my life, but I found my why, and it propelled me, even though everybody else doubted. They were like, you've never been in a debate. I had never been, but that why kept me going, and it keeps me going to this very day. Know your why. Why you? Why now? God will show you. That's it.
See, I knew she had a word. That's why I saved it. She always has a word. So thank you so much, Wendi, Wallace, Jaime Harrison, Representative Lisa Blount Rochester, and my co-moderator for the evening, the fantastic Karen Finney, for spending the evening with Higher Heights and the hashtag Black Women Lead community. I'm going to kick it to Aisha because she has some exciting things about what's coming up and how you can be engaged, because we are stronger together and there's work to be done, ladies, and for those couple of great gentlemen that have been on this conversation. So thank you for spending the evening with us.
Thank you so much for joining us with the A-Team, with the incredible leaders that we had here this evening. So we are, of course, completing our summer virtual series, and many of you have asked if we have training coming up. So please make sure that you are signed up as a member by going to higherheightsforamerica.org. We dropped the link in the chat already, and then also definitely check out our new merchandise. I'm excited about the water bottles and also the Black Women Lead Pride shirts. So we have it all there. Make sure you pick up the new merch. And then also make sure that you are signed up to be an insider on the latest of Higher Heights, and save the date for our Black Women Lead virtual Reach Higher weekend, October 22nd through 24th. We will be hosting our fall boot camp with some more amazing people who are experts in the field from around the country to help Black women lead. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you at the next event. Until then, reach higher.